Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alyssa Globe, and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, the podcast co-host, Scott Hayward. How's it going?
Hi, Alyssa. Good. How's it going with you?
Pretty good.
What do you think the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs basically is an entirely new team after the trade deadline?
Yeah, and I mean, they were supposed to be defensively stronger, and given that Vancouver scored two shorties, two shorthanded goals against them on Saturday was somewhat depressing.
And Ryan O'Reilly got hurt.
Yes.
Do you know how long he's out for?
No.
That's really too bad. I really like O'Reilly because he played for years. First he was with Buffalo, right? Then he went over to the St. Louis Blues. So then he was in our division, Central Division, where the Jets are. And when they went for that crazy run from being the worst team in the NHL at the end of January to going win the Stanley Cup and beating the Boston Bruins while they're at it, which should make you happy.
Well, it also makes me happy Marchand is hurt too, I think. Or at least.
Yeah, but that's not the first time I think though that he's been hurt. Like this, I think this is one of the first times that O'Reilly's been hurt. And
I'm surprised Marchand has never broken his nose. That thing's everywhere.
That's like half his body mass. Yeah, because when O'Reilly, the very first game he went to the Leafs, he got a Hattie. And then he's been doing some really great things for them, like as a third line center. And I was like, wow, like that's the type of guy that you need to go beyond the first round for Tampa. And Tampa, like Winnipeg, Tampa's in a 5-game losing streak. Winnipeg just got over that by like crazy.
Same as Calgary,
game.
five game losing streak.
Yeah. It was a crazy game between the Jets and the Oilers on Saturday at back-to-back. It looked like kind of like old school, like 1980s hockey from the Jets and the Oilers back then. So it was kind of nostalgic in that way. But yeah, the one concern I have for the Leafs is that I really like what Dubas has done, and like on paper completely makes sense, and hopefully they have enough time with, kind of 19, 20 games left to let it jive. But sometimes when you do such a huge turnover, you kind of lose that chemistry, and I really hope that Toronto hasn't done that.
And like, why really this year too? Because I mean,
the contracts start to come up though, right?
Yeah.
Like the Matthews contract and the Marner contract. Like, I think it's like the Jets. I don't think like it's this summer, but they'll have to make decisions next summer. So, I mean, they got rid of a lot of first round picks to kind of go all in, and so and Dubas's contract I think is up at the end of this season, next season maybe, I can't remember.
Go big or go broke.
Basically.
Yeah, my husband Aaron and I went to the Calgary versus Leafs game here in Calgary on last Thursday. We go every year because they play here once a year, and it's always a good time. The game was a little boring, but I got to rub it in my husband's
Was that
face.
2-1?
Yeah, and I told him, like, when we first sat down, I said...
But the disallowed goal
was... Yeah. I told him, though, I said, you will score first, but we will win the game. Because we were coming off the Oilers embarrassment. It was like 5-2 or something. So I'm like, they need to kind of get going. And, basically, I'm always right. So it was proven once again to my husband.
If that goal was allowed, which obviously it wouldn't have been because it was offside.
Yeah.
And even like the second Toronto goal was like iffy because of the crashing of the net and everything like that.
All the goals were pretty bad. Like it was.
Yeah. Actually, you're right. You're right. Even that first Calgary goal was. Yeah. So that game really could have gone either way. That 2-1 could have gone either way. Yeah. It's interesting. Anyway,
for all the non-hockey fans have completely turned off this podcast by now. I don't really have. I haven't done too much stuff lately. Like over the weekend, it was pretty lazy weekend. The only sort of update I have to report is I have started going to the gym every morning. So I get up at like 5:30 and
flash those guns. Let's see. Whoa.
I know. I needed like a big baggy sweater just to like be able to
cover it up. That's right. You're ripping through your others right now.
I'm like The Rock in Fast and Furious when he flexes his cast off and says, "Daddy's got to go to work." That's basically what I do before every podcast.
Is that what you tell Aaron? Daddy's got to go to work.
Exactly.
I really should bring it in here. It's downstairs in the basement, but I was rowing before this podcast, and then I was talking to a mutual friend of ours about a nomination situation, and the string for the bar for rowing ripped. I ripped it in half. So my wife was really impressed with me, but I had to like pump the brakes and just say like, listen, let's be honest. Like I use the machine a lot and it just wear and tear and it broke. So
is it fixable?
I'll call the company and I think it's on warranty still.
Yeah.
So unless they're like, you've rowed this many thousands of miles.
Next time we're together, we should have an arm wrestle for our viewers to see.
Okay.
Stronger.
Well, I'm destroying my rowing machine, and you have to wear baggy shirts. So, that's a toss up.
It's true. Anything new in your neck of the woods?
Hey, this weekend we had one of our very first post-COVID RightNow events, public events.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a seminar and we had some current and former pro-life politicians and staffers come out and speak. We had a great turnout, well over 50 people, and lots of great questions. And then we had a pub night afterward, was a lot of fun, especially because I got to watch the end of the Jets-Oilers game. But it was great. It was great to just kind of get out, reconnect with people, and you can't do it through Zoom. You can't do it through text. You can't do it through phone calling, as helpful those things are. Like there's just something about face to face, and we made lots of contacts. We got a bunch of new people into our database, and actually there was a bunch of pro-lifers from the GTA telling me that just kind of on their own volition, and they kind of knew the things that we were talking about last few years. They got their fellow pro-lifers together, was like at the same church or whatever, sold a bunch of memberships, and they went and they took over a bunch of EDAs in the GTA, which was great to hear. Yeah. So good on them.
I totally know what you mean. I did go to Chilliwack last Friday for a presentation, and every time I'm like, oh, I don't want to leave my family, and I kind of have that homebody attitude right now, but the minute that I'm on the plane and I'm out there talking to people and doing the presentation, I just get amped up. I get so much energy from that. And it is really exciting to meet new people and to talk about politics and to have them be as enthusiastic about changing, the political landscape as I am. And it really does make a huge difference. So I'm really happy we're able to do that again.
Yeah, there's a lot of, not this should be necessarily the podcast topic, but just to kind of wrap up this conversation, there's a lot of work that our organization still needs to do. There's a lot of pro-lifers out there in Canada. They're kind of, they know they need to do something politically, but they don't know exactly what that is and kind of what the timeline is and what the realistic expectations are. And I know we're talking about your presentation in Chilliwack and the ones that I'm doing until the end of March. These are fundraising presentations, right? They're not necessarily, information sessions, so to speak, but there are people that come to these fundraising presentations that never heard of us before, that fall in love with what we do, and they've been pro-life their whole life. And there's tons of pro-lifers, millions of pro-lifers in Canada that don't know who we are, that would love to be in our database. And
every single time I go to a presentation, people are like angry that they haven't heard of us or we haven't been involved with us before, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but now's a good time to start. But I think a lot of people are really excited about what we're doing and our plan, our strategy. Like, it's so laid out and concrete. It's not abstract and like, oh, we need to do this every day for the rest of our lives kind of thing. It's like, here's our 1-year plan, 2-year plan, 5-year plan, so this is how many people, like, it's way easier to convince people when you have a very strategic, numerical, results driven plan. And that's what I think that's what they really like.
I mean, that's why we started this whole thing, right? that and to have a podcast.
Yeah, of course. Well, speaking of podcasts, let's get started on our topics. There's been quite a few news stories this week. We'll just touch on a few. And the first has to do with one of our favorite politicians, which is Leslyn Lewis. And she made the headlines this past week because a German politician named Christine Anderson, who is a member of the European Parliament with Germany's Alternative für Deutschland, AfD party, was on a cross-Canada tour, and she went to a restaurant with 3 Conservative MPs, Dean Allison, Leslyn Lewis, and Colin Carey. And when these photos emerged, it became a news story. And then the leader, the office of the official opposition, the leader's office, a representative from the leader's office, Sebastian Skamsky, responded to this news story and this meeting with the three MPs, saying that Christine Anderson's views are vile and have no place in our politics. The MPs were not aware of this visiting member of European Parliament's opinions, and they regret meeting with her. This is where it gets fun. Frankly, it would be better if Anderson never visited Canada in the first place. She and her racist, hateful views are not welcome here. Now, just to recap our visitor for our listeners, when the convoy was in Ottawa, Trudeau said of those participating that they were a small fringe minority with unacceptable views. So basically, Sebastian Skamsky is taking his teepees directly from the Trudeau talking point book. Then Pierre's office issued a separate statement saying that that it is common for MPs to meet with visiting elected officials from other countries, and that they were not aware of views or associations of her and her political party. So he said, "We do not share or endorse her views and strongly condemn any views that are racist or hateful." And then Colin Carey immediately bent. He said he profoundly regrets attending the meeting, and basically used the excuse that he didn't vet who he was meeting with when he should have. Anderson then said that she had spoken to Pierre Poilievre a few times, and that he was like a good guy and she enjoyed it, and Pierre's office denied it. Now, I don't know about you, and maybe you can shed some light on this, but in every single article that I read, both from Canada and in other parts of the country, or in the world,
you're brushing up on your German.
Well, I mean, like because there were articles written, from like left wing periodicals in Germany and stuff. Like they did cite those websites, and you can just translate them. So as best as I could tell, the only thing, it was just that, BBC described the AFD as a far-right political party that employs rhetoric tinged with Nazi overtones. Then there was some University of Victoria professor who said that she's anti-immigration, homophobic, and at times an openly racist. The party is anti-immigration, homophobic, and at times openly racist, which I feel like CBC calls the Conservative Party every day. And I could only find like two specific instances of things where the mainstream media would take offense, and that would be that the leader of the AFD told supporters that Berlin's memorial to the victims of the Holocaust was a memorial of shame, and that history books should be rewritten to focus more on German victims. But they were trying to frame that as if he was like denying the Holocaust or something, when I think it was more so an inappropriate direction of nationalism, like German nationalism, basically. And then after the withdrawal of coalition forces from Afghanistan, Anderson told the EU it should call the devil by its name, blaming Islam as a whole for the treatment of women under the Taliban regime. But I didn't get her direct quote on that. That's what it says in the article. She just said, call the devil by its name. So again, it's like all these kind of, she's racist, but there's like no examples whatsoever of her specifically being racist, or any of the allegations that the mainstream media in Canada is just throwing out there when reporting on this story.
Yeah, I think the issue is more so that she is a member of the European Parliament for the Alternative für Deutschland, and that there are members of the AFD that currently, and most especially previously, have held either certain positions that personally I wouldn't agree with, or the party or the not necessarily the party policy that I could find, but the party communications, particularly in the 2013 federal elections to the Bundestag, which is the federal parliament in Berlin for Germany, that I would say I'm not necessarily like a fan of, right? So anything from Christine Anderson specifically, I couldn't really find, but certain things attached to her political party or fellow caucus colleagues or former caucus colleagues, they're trying to tie to her. And listen, like if I were a member of the Conservative Party of Canada, there would be certain things that I would vehemently disagree with my caucus colleagues within the Conservative caucus.
Mhm.
There are about 40-ish Conservative MPs as opposed to about 80, one of them being Pierre of the 40, who are perfectly fine with dismembering a preborn baby girl in the womb simply because she's a girl, right? They voted against Kathy Wagenthal's sex selective abortion bill. Frankly, like, yeah, I'm not super happy to sit in a caucus with someone who holds those vile and disgusting views, but I would not want to be painted with that per se.
Mhm.
So, can you apply that to Christine Anderson completely? Because there are other people in her caucus that hold what some people might consider to be vile and disgusting and racist views. It's you could potentially make that argument. Why doesn't she sit outside the party? Well, maybe she's trying to change the party. I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm not going to speak for her,
Mhm.
but her specifically as a person, as an individual, yeah, I couldn't really find anything, except for one thing is that I believe that she supports not allowing kosher and halal products to be imported into Germany or to be butchered like that in Germany, which I think is dumb. Like, sure, like whatever you want to. You want to rage against certain parts and interpretations of the Islamic faith, like what the Taliban do, then like fine. But like not allowing halal products to come into Germany, I don't think is really going to change anything per se. So that's one. And then the racist anti-Semitic one is the former leader of the party a number of years ago said, through the 1200 years of German history, so you're talking about from the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire in the 800s going forward, you have a 12-year stain of what he described as bird shit, which is when the National Socialist Party was in power in Germany, which is an apt way, I think we can all agree, of describing, the National Socialists and their vile and legitimately racist policies that they had while they were in power. Now, can you say, to completely ignore it and that you shouldn't have a Holocaust memorial in Berlin? Like, I personally would, disagree with that. Those who forget history tend to repeat it.
Mhm.
But at the same time, German history isn't, he's not wrong. German history isn't just 12 years, it's 1200 years. And there are other issues, of course, in German history within those 1200 years. But I mean, what country you're going to find that doesn't have any issues? Maybe not quite as
So
egregious as the
he
Holocaust,
wasn't
but
trying to say like he wasn't trying to kind of say we should also focus on victims of the Holocaust in Germany, but he was trying to say like he was trying to sort of downplay the Holocaust. Is that what the interpretation is?
I don't know. Like, I didn't see like the original video or anything like that. I read a quote and it was one quote. So
Mm.
like, if there's a video, like I would want to watch the whole thing and trust it being translated. Although like German's kind of relatively easy to pick up a little bit for those who are English speaking. So I can't really comment on that,
Right.
right? And I'm not going to. But all I can say is that for her specifically, like
Mhm.
the only one thing specifically that she has done that I could find at least, and maybe there are other things out there that I would kind of disagree with, is like not allowing for the preparation of foods according to being kosher and halal or the importation of them into Germany.
Yeah.
Like I think that's just kind of dumb. That doesn't do anything. So
Mhm.
specifically, like her, like it doesn't seem to be an issue. And so this is interesting
And no
because,
one pointed to that either. It was just like she's racist.
yeah,
It's not
except
like
Leslyn didn't buy into
yeah.
the
Yeah.
BS. And so the timeline of this is Christine Anderson had a brief tour in Canada, 4 different stops, 2, I believe, in Alberta, 1 in just outside of the GTA in Whitby, and then another one in Montreal. And so I think it was in the Montreal event or the night before, or something like that, is where the Conservative members of Parliament met with her.
Mm.
Because during the convoy, like you said, she was very, very strong against what was happening in Canada as well as in Germany. And she's kind of a folk hero amongst a lot of the kind of trucker convoy people.
Mhm.
And so that photo was tweeted out or whatever. And Warren Kinsella, boom, was all over it, saying, now all these Conservative MPs are racist because Christine Anderson is a racist, which is, when I went through, it's like I couldn't really find that per se. And so, the OLO freaked out, and on that Friday, which I believe was February 24th, if I want to get the timeline right here. Yeah, so that Friday, later that day in the morning, they issued that statement from, a lot of people think it's Sebastian in the leader's office, who's the director of media relations. I don't know if we know for sure, but basically through Brian Lilly with the statement that you read. And then no one really said anything. So because they made the apology on the MP's behalf. So like you said, Dr. Colin Carey made his own apology, and if he feels that way, then whatever, it's his right to do so. But the other two, Dean Allison didn't say anything, and then Leslyn had an interview with Joe Warmington, and then later that evening, he wrote an article where she basically defended herself, no problem, and struck back against Trudeau very strongly rhetorically, like, why is this man who can't even remember how many times that he's dressed up in blackface is telling me, a black woman, who I have to sit across from him from the aisle in the House of Commons and listen to basically this actual racist or someone who has done racist things call me a racist? Like, how does that make any sense? Like, how is the black woman a racist here? And really, she gave, frankly, the OLO a huge lesson on how to deal with comms. And now what we're seeing today on Monday, March 6th, at the time that we're recording this podcast, that at the leaders, at Pierre Poilievre's presser earlier today, and when he was questioned on that, he's actually now using Leslyn's talking points that, frankly, he should have been using the whole time. And there are no repercussions for Leslyn, despite the fact that Corey Tenake and others want her to be kicked out of caucus. But I'm sorry, Corey, that's not how the Federal Conservative Caucus works. There's a thing called the Reform Act, and if a member of caucus needs to be ejected, the whole caucus has to have a secret ballot vote on it. You can't just willy-nilly eject people like you did when you were in the Premier's office and basically brought Doug Ford from a majority position in the House of the Legislative Assembly in Queen's Park almost to minority position because he kicked out like 10 or 12 caucus members, whatever it was, from the PC Party of Ontario. So this is interesting because we're kind of seeing a situation now where we finally have a member of Parliament, and frankly, there have been other MPs in the past who have kind of stood up for themselves, and we saw that with Aaron O'Toole, but someone who's like speaking kind of truth to power, doesn't care what the OLO says, doesn't care what the PMO says, doesn't care what the media says, cuts through all the bullshit, and now she's like a darling. If you read the media reactions between the weak statement that came from Pierre's office to Brian Lilley versus Leslyn, like you have this repercussion, and I think you have a lot of people, not to make this a Leslyn versus Pierre thing, because we already had the leadership race, but I've seen hundreds of comments over the last couple of weeks being like, oh, like I voted for Pierre, but maybe I should vote for Leslyn in the leadership race. And one other thing I'll say this about Alissa, and I know I'm going on this rant, but hey, this is our podcast, and so I get to do so. Down the street from where my wife and I live, on Saturday, there was a Pierre Poilievre rally. And I couldn't go to it because I had already signed up to do an hour-long vigil for 40 Days for Life, which I do every time. At least once during the autumn and in the spring, if you can call this spring, with all the snow we've been getting here over the last little bit. So I couldn't go anyway. And then we had our event in downtown Toronto. But I passed by it. I drove by it, right? About a half hour before the rally is supposed to start. And there were two types of protesters there at the Pierre Poilievre rally. Number one were the pro-life protesters, because he's not pro-life. And number two were the truckers, because now the truckers are angry given the fact that his office at least, seemingly threw Leslyn and Christine Anderson and basically a lot of their views and values under the bus.
Yeah.
And so they got to be careful about this.
Yeah. What I appreciate is that, like, immediately the OLO and Pierre's office immediately spoke for the three MPs. I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I don't know if they spoke with them, but I find it very suspect that they spoke with Leslyn and she was like, oh, I didn't know her views. Like, that is not the Leslyn we know.
Not according to her comments of Joe Warmington or the comments that she's been making on Twitter. So
they just spoke for her. They just immediately responded and spoke for her, thinking that they could sort of silence these MPs and get them to use their talking points, which are completely false. Then Leslyn turns it around and speaks for herself, because that's what she was elected to do. So the article by Joe Warmington, the title is "Conservative MP Leslyn Lewis Won't Be Called a Racist by Blackface PM." And the subtitle is "The Haldeman Norfolk MP is demanding an apology and Trudeau's immediate resignation from office." Now, the best line in this entire article comes later on, near the very end, and her quote is, I won't allow him to throw another woman under the bus. All he does is try to divide, demonize, and destroy women's careers, primarily minority women. And now he's attempting to do the same thing to me. And I'm starting to believe there was a reason he wore blackface. Like, wow. So
Oh,
I love that she speaks for herself. She set the tone, not the party. And now
yeah.
the party is taking on her tone and not this groveling, we didn't know, pathetic response that they initially had. So that is specifically and precisely why it's so important to get involved in nominations and elections, because if the party doesn't respond in a way that we like, and we'll talk about this later on when it comes to social conservative issues, we need to elect politicians like Leslyn and others who will actually set the tone and speak for themselves. And far too often, even in, with pro-life MPs, they just cower to what the party tells or what the leader tells them. And it's very refreshing for, MPs to speak for themselves, because oftentimes what we see on the outside isn't what they actually believe. So that was really refreshing. And it was interesting too, because when Pierre tweeted that day after that, after his office put out that statement, he tweeted about the Ukraine war or something, and it was ratioed, but not because it had anything to do with the war. It was ratioed because of what he had
Yeah.
said about Christine Anderson. Everyone was pissed. And I haven't seen him get ratioed really ever, especially on Twitter. So
Not for a very long time. Yeah, and there was actually a few tweets that he put out that were ratioed during the weekend. So damage done, and we see it, or I saw it at least driving by, like truckers protesting Pierre Poilievre. Like, these are the same people that all bought memberships en masse to vote for him as leader.
And I want to say too, like, it's more than just blackface. It's like the guy stuck a banana down his pants and acted like a monkey. Like, it's a little bit more than just,
Yeah,
being Chris Rock for Halloween or something. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think that's also important to note as well.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com.
And be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
All right. So another big story in the news last week and carrying on over to this week is this whole story about Chinese interference in the 2019 and onward elections. So basically, somebody from CSIS spoke out anonymously talking about how 3 weeks before the 2019 federal election, CSIS gave an urgent classified briefing to senior aides from Trudeau's office, warning them that one of their candidates, is it Han Dong or is it Han? Han
That's
Dong.
right.
Han Dong was part of a Chinese foreign interference network. So national security officials also said that Dong, who is now a sitting MP and got reelected, is supported by Beijing and believes him to be a willing affiliate in China's election interference networks. So this guy had met with, questionable senior officials from organizations that basically are looking to build influence within the conservative government, so that they can look out for their own interests, and then also for those who speak out against China and the government, that they have ramifications and repercussions, and basically try and vote them out and get them out of parliament. Now, there's way more to this story, but that's roughly what the story is. Another thing to note is that it was also alleged that international students during his nomination were given fake IDs and bussed into his riding to vote for him so that he would win that nomination, which is just insane.
Yeah, so there's a few different things to note here. There's about 3 different accusations that are going on. So in the 2019 federal election, the Communist Party of China was meddling financially and otherwise. And this is according to the CSIS report, mind you, right? Which is the Canada's spy agency, basically our version of the CIA. The whistleblower from CSIS in this report, and it sounds like some members of the media have seen the report, or at least aspects of the report, that there were 11 federal candidates in that election that the communists were supporting, 9 of them being liberals and 2 of them being conservatives. So just we're aware, it's not just affecting the Liberal Party of Canada. And then in the 2019 election, there was about, they said, $250,000 kind of laundered through various people. So it sounds like basically what would happen is the Chinese communists would pay someone $1,500 or whatever the max donation amount was that year, and then they would go and pay or pardon me, donate to a specific candidate, the candidate they told them to donate to. And that in 2019, this is, CISA said that the MP being Han Dong was compromised, and then that the Liberal Party of Canada was informed at that time that he was compromised. Then in 2021, the Chinese communists got involved in the election again. This time, though, they were a little more aggressive in that they were wanting to make sure that, according to the CSIS report, that the Liberal Party of Canada got re-elected, but with a minority, and that specific Conservative members of Parliament would get unelected. So the 3 that have been identified in the report are Alice Wong from British Columbia, from Vancouver, Richmond, then Kenny Chu from Richmond, Steveston East, also in suburban Vancouver, and Bob Soroya in Markham Unionville. So all 3 of those ridings have a very, very high Chinese-speaking population. And just to kind of paint everyone a bit of a picture, they do also coercion because they're communists, right? This is something, of course, Vladimir Putin used to be part of with the KGB in Soviet Russia. So the way that they operate is they threaten your family back home, right? So I have spoken personally with former high-ranking officials within the Conservative Party of Canada who told me that their family back home in China has been threatened by the communists, people to disappear and things like that. I was even told by my great uncle that as late as 1985, the Polish communists, who are really Soviets from Russia, were threatening my own family back home in Poland and demanding that they tell them who their family in Canada is, where they live, and their contact information, which would include me. I mean, I wasn't born in 1985, but would include, my mother, for example. So this stuff is very real. The shit is very real. It happens today. And compared to 30 years ago, in 1985, now in 2023, it's much easier to do this sort of stuff with social media and cell phones and the internet and things of this nature. So it's very, very real. And this is what has been happening for the last little bit here in Canada. Now, the other thing to note, too, is that those 3 Conservative members of Parliament that I've noted, Alice Wong, Kenny Chu, and Bob Soroya, they're all pro-life. They're all pro-life Conservative members of Parliament as well. So to think like, well, why are we talking about this on a social conservative podcast? Well, now we have 3 fewer pro-life members of Parliament in those ridings that were replaced all by pro-abortion members of Parliament. And in all 3 of those ridings, the margins were very, very slim. So, all this to say, like, did it affect the overall result of the election? Probably not. Like, the Liberals probably would have been elected with a relatively healthy minority government. But it did affect the result in at least 3 ridings, if not more. So probably you're talking like 4 or 5, maybe 6. And that's, not nothing. Now, the Prime Minister has been asked, to kind of answer questions on this. When did he know what and when? A number of officials have been called before a public committee of the House of Commons that has been going on for the past couple of weeks investigating this. One of the problems is that the committee is trying to ask for information that is technically classified. And so it's difficult to go to a House of Commons committee with information that's classified because you can't really say anything. So there's kind of 2 general ways to go about this. Number one, you can use a committee of that has representation from every recognized party in the House of Commons that is sworn to secrecy, where you can reveal documents and all that type of stuff. The problem, of course, is that you can't debate it then, right? Because you're sworn to secrecy. The other solution is to have a independent public inquiry, which is something that has happened multiple times. This is something that is required by law, for example, that happened with the Rouleau report when a federal government exercises the ability or the right, I suppose, to use the Emergencies Act. There has to be a public inquiry and a report that comes from that. So you can basically use that sort of method as well for this. So the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and the Conservatives have all called for a public inquiry. So far, the Liberals have said no because there is a committee to do this. This is kind of what they did with SNC-Lavalin as well. They avoided the call for a public inquiry, and then they just used a House of Commons committee. I don't know if they'll get away with that this time because of the issue of classified documents, but I believe that public inquiry can require certain documentation to be made public. So we have to wait and see. Apparently, as we're recording this, within the next hour and a half, the Prime Minister is going to have a press conference where I think a lot of people on Twitter are suspecting that he is going to have a public inquiry, which suggests to me if the Prime Minister is willing to have a public inquiry on this, that I don't know how damaging it's going to be to him, because it sounds like the Chinese communists have affected not just the Liberal Party of Canada, but a variety of political parties, like a few in the Conservatives as well. So we'll see. But that's kind of the timeline of it and what's happening thus far.
So is it possible, like, would Alice Wong and even Han Dong and these politicians, would they know that this was happening? Like, how, what is their involvement to, or how, what would their, how deep would their involvement be in this, do you think?
That's a really good question. Like, it sounds like Han Dong is like the one who's actually legitimately compromised, like actually working with the Chinese communists, very well aware of everything. And that seems to be the alarm bell that CSIS had supposedly raised to the Liberal Party of Canada, which very well could have been the case. Both Han Dong and the Prime Minister deny it. Now, of course, the Prime Minister has a history of denying things publicly that is later revealed to not be the case, as we know through the recorded conversations between Jody Wilson-Raybould and Michael Vernick and a few other high-ranking officials in the Privy Council's office, in the Prime Minister's office during the SNC-Lavalin affair. Although nothing, frankly, recorded between her and the Prime Minister that directly implicated the Prime Minister. But it sounded like most people believed her over the Prime Minister. So anyway, just because Trudeau says that he denies it doesn't mean it's the case. So thus the public inquiry. Now, if that's what he's going to announce later today, then it kind of suggests to me that he probably has nothing to worry about. And that very well may be the case. And it might be the fact that we have a very weak, not intelligence, because obviously CSIS has brought this up, but we just have a weak system of keeping Chinese communists out from doing this sort of small-scale infiltration. But it sounds like the other candidates may not be aware that they were accepting money from Chinese communists, that they were accepting volunteer help from Chinese communists, from those Chinese students, or votes or whatever have you, both for nominations and for actual elections. This is something, to his credit, that Aaron O'Toole and his office brought up before and during the 2021 election campaign, and after as well. So they were aware of it. They heard about it. I even had a supporter of ours, Alissa, come to our pub night on the weekend to say, like, hey, if you want to get involved in certain ridings within Metro Vancouver and the GTA that have Chinese speaking populations, whether it be Mandarin or Cantonese, please let me know, because, I didn't really believe in this being compromised by Chinese communist stuff, but he kind of told me, like, yeah, over the last year, I've been very much convinced of it. And so I would like to help you kind of guide through it, so people just don't play you in your organization for fools, so to speak, because a lot of these ridings are winnable for the Conservatives and the Liberals, frankly, too. They're swing ridings, right? They're your typical suburban swing ridings. So it's important for us, Alissa, for us to be aware and kind of have our head on a swivel too going into this. So it sounds like Han Dong is the only one thus far that is legitimately compromised and has been cooperating with the Chinese communists.
Which brings us to our last topic, because a lot of people think that she tweeted this out to kind of change the topic from Chinese interference or foreign interference in the 2019 election. But yesterday, Katie Telford, who is the chief of staff to Trudeau, tweeted out just totally randomly, I am unabashedly pro-choice, but you must regularly talk about politicians who are not. You don't have to look very far to know how human rights, especially abortion rights, can be taken away even in 2023. Keep speaking out. It's not about tactics. It's about rights. Have a great day. So this, of course, got ratioed as well. But and the response by conservatives, though, really peeved me off. And I'm not talking about conservative politicians, just the average kind of conservative tweeter that's very involved, whether in polling or staffers or whatever, how they responded. And it's kind of how politicians do respond in general. And I kind of want to bring this up because it's super annoying, because whenever the Liberals bring up abortion or push abortion, which they do regularly, especially when an election is around the corner, the response by the Conservatives is, oh, trying to deflect from this, or, trying to change the topic from Chinese interference or election interference, or, oh, nothing's been done about abortion, so why are you bringing this up? Like, those responses, again, are weak. It's exactly how OLO responded to the whole Leslyn story, and we need conservatives to respond in an actual oppositional way to the issue that is being brought up. Because the majority of this isn't a winnable issue for Katie Telford when she says that she's unabashedly pro-choice. Like, a very small Trudeau, I'm going to use Trudeau's words here, fringe minority.
Small fringe minority.
are unabashedly pro-choice. Like, what that actually means is that you are in favor of abortion up until the point of birth. They are in favor of abortion because a woman chooses to have an abortion solely because the fetus is female or has Down syndrome. Like, this is what unabashedly pro-choice is. The majority of Canadians want restrictions on abortion. And if you talk to anyone, even people who are passionate even about the abortion issue, even they think that there should be term limits. They don't agree with late-term abortion or sex-selective abortion. The overwhelming majority, like 94% of Canadians, are against sex-selective abortion. So this is not this hugely winnable issue. And, we saw Leslyn Lewis tackle these talking points successfully during the 2 leadership races that she's been involved in. And again, the Conservative Party and people in general, conservatives in general, need to follow her lead, like Pierre did in the first case, and actually talk about these talking points instead of just trying to change the subject or accusing the other side of changing the subject. Because if we actually have a good oppositional talking points, like, we will win votes.
Yeah, and like to be fair, like, that's exactly what Katie Telford is doing. Like, she is trying to deflect from the China issue.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe. And maybe they're building up to, International Women's Day, which they like to co-opt for, like, hey, abortions for all day, which coincidentally enough is, your birthday.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. So, like,
I'm turning 25.
We're going backwards now. Benjamin Button.
Forwards, baby. Always.
Yeah, okay, always forwards, yeah. So, like, it could be that, but it likely is a deflection. But the point remains, right? Like, you can say that this is a deflection, but you can also address the issue at the same time, right? That's what Leslyn did with the Christine Anderson thing, right? She addressed it straight on. She took on the issue, and then she hit back.
Yeah.
We never, as in the Conservative Party of Canada, never hit back on this issue. Like, saying that you're just deflecting by bringing this up and that you haven't actually done anything on abortion, like, you're not hitting back. Like, that's like a flimsy little slap. You want to punch Trudeau in the face rhetorically, you got to get to the crux of the issue. So you, like, send out someone like, Leslyn Lewis or Raquel Dancho or Leanne Rood or someone like that and say, yeah, you know what, like, I personally don't believe that a preborn baby girl should be ripped apart in the womb from limb to limb just because she's a girl. But that racist misogynist over there across the aisle, being Prime Minister Trudeau, does. And he's also trying to deflect on this issue and just bring it back to China. And you say, you know what else, like, where they have tons of sex-selective abortions is communist China.
Yeah, somebody actually did tweet that. I loved it.
Yeah. A place I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm just coming up with this
Yeah.
because I'm a genius. A place where Trudeau says that he loves the dictatorship,
Yeah.
and so it makes sense that his candidate Hong Dong is going to be compromised, and they're going to get all this money from the Chinese communists
Yeah.
for CSIS.
That's
Right?
that's the best talking
just
point you
swing.
can have.
So
Yeah.
you address the issue right away. You hit it. You hit back, and then you can swing back because it's not like Chinese communists are pro-life. Like they're extraordinarily pro-abortion. I mean, they had a one-child policy for decades and decades and decades. So like, it's not that hard. And like, I'm not paid $200,000 a year to, advise the leader of the opposition on communications, but maybe I should because I just came up with that on my head. Like,
Yeah.
it's just again, it's another thing. Like, new leader, same thing, and to be fair to Pierre, he's only been leader for a few months. It hasn't even been a year. But get rid of these quote unquote professional conservatives that get in the way.
Yeah, I'm going to differentiate. I think it's important to differentiate at this stage between Pierre and his staffers, although it is his fault that he's hired these staffers. But when Pierre talks, it's not as painful as when they send out these statements, or even when these staffers are responding to things like that, because it is the same old lame losing talking points from 30 years ago, when Pierre is seen as this like spicy, good at rhetoric kind of politician. Will use that for all issues, not just economic ones. Use that spiciness for this issue as well. Even if you don't believe it, you can still have a good response. Like you said, who also is unabashedly pro-choice, your buddies at the CCP, like that would be an amazing talking point because like you said, it is a deflection. But it also would be a good talking point because it addresses the issue head on. So yeah, it's annoying, and I think that these establishment kind of conservatives, and I'm not even talking or criticizing conservative politicians or even Pierre because no one responded to it directly. It was more just like a lot of these kind of milquetoast conservatives were like, who are in her responses were saying these kind of old guard conservative party responses. And we need a new shift. We need a fresh perspective. We need something that takes us from the defensive to the offensive, especially on social issues, because we know that the Liberals will continuously bring this up. They always do. And our responses suck ass. Like, seriously, they're so terrible. So get better responses and get them fast. And listen to politicians who actually do want to be on the offensive and have good talking points and use those instead, which it does give me hope that Pierre took Leslyn's talking points in the Christine Anderson thing. Who knows? Maybe in the future, when this is brought up again, especially in the next election, he might have better talking points than the "we're not going to reopen this debate" that we're typically used to hearing.
Yeah, you know what? That's a whole part of trying to be part of a team and trying to be part, collaborative. Like, our organization right now is nonpartisan. Like, if Pierre and his team are open to better talking points, then we'll help with that. If for whatever reason, Jagmeet Singh or even the Prime Minister wanted to have better talking points and move on the issue, then I'm not going to say no to that.
Yeah.
Like, the more people who want to be more pro-life or at least less pro-abortion, whether in their votes or in their comms, more than happy to work with. And the piss off is that instead of setting out like an overly emotional, not well thought out response like they did to Brian Lilley on the 24th of February from the OLO, and instead actually talk to someone like Leslyn, they could have been using Leslyn's talking points right from the get-go.
And not had so much madness.
And now not have truckers protesting at your rally who, this time last year were inside in your rally, buying memberships, giving, your campaign money to go and win that leadership race. Like, you really don't want to go down the road of Aaron O'Toole.
Yeah.
And that is a great way to go down it. So you're right. Like, he himself is not nearly as painful speaking about it, these sorts of things, as like when stuff comes from their office. And so hopefully the lesson can be learned, and hopefully we can help be a part of that.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At La Ross Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larossmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with La Ross Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
All right, now we're just going to end off this podcast, Scott. You were not super aware of this, but I actually did a little bit of research in honor of St. Patrick's Day, which is coming up. I'm going to quiz you to see how much you know about St. Patrick and just the day in general. So,
Okay.
Are you ready?
Born ready.
All right. All right, so basically you have to tell me if...
Also, good thing that like both of us are not wearing green. Right?
I was actually contemplating it, but it's
Same
not
here.
my color. Okay, so basically I just want you to tell me if it's true or false.
Sure.
Okay, now question number 1. St. Patrick's real name was Maywin Suckett.
I'm going to say that's false.
That is true.
Suck it?
Suckett. Suckett. Succat. Maywin Suckett. Suckett. I'm going to stop saying suck it. Okay, number 2. Before 1970, St. Patrick's Day was a dry holiday.
I mean, where? Because this is important because it's much more. It's celebrated a lot more and has been celebrated a lot more in North America, particularly in places like New York City and Boston, than it was in Ireland itself. In Ireland itself, it really wasn't that big of a thing until later because the Irish diaspora in those places like New York, Montreal, Boston kind of used that to celebrate their Irishness and their Irish heritage. So.
Yeah, give me 1 second here. I want to see where, because I think in Ireland.
I was saying in Ireland that might make sense. So I'm gonna go true on that because I know for a fact that in places like New York and stuff, that's definitely not the case.
That is true. Yes,
Yeah.
It's true because it was a religious holiday.
During Lent mostly.
And so it was so that everything was closed, but now that it's like an actual, like, it's not, nothing's closed but it's still celebrated and everything's open, it's like a huge money maker. Let me just find out exactly what it says here. I'm like not lost my page. Let me get back to it at the end here.
It's fine. I'm right.
All right.
So I'm 500.
Number 3, it takes 100 pounds of green vegetable dye to turn the Chicago River green.
100 pounds?
Yeah.
It'd be more than that. That's false.
It's false because it's less. So when they when they first tried it, the very first time they ever tried it, they did use 100 pounds and it turned the river green for a week. And so now they've perfected it, and it only takes 25 pounds.
Really? I'm shocked. I thought it's for sure it'd take more than that.
All right, number 4. In folklore, there are no female leprechauns.
I'm going to say true.
That is true.
Yeah. How they reproduce, we'll never know. So what am I? I have only one wrong so far, right?
I think so.
I'm 3-1. Although like the Chicago River one is suspect. But.
Okay. Number 5. St. Patrick was actually German.
No, he was Scottish. The English will say he's English, but he's actually Scottish.
He was British. That's what it says.
Scottish. He's from Scotland. He was taken by pirates along the coast.
It says he was born in Britain, and then joined the priesthood.
He was captured by pirates and brought to Ireland.
He was captured by pirates? I did not
Yeah, along the
read
coast. Yeah.
That is weird. Okay.
Like slave traders.
Number 6. St. Patrick banished the snakes from Ireland.
100%.
False.
And I will die on that one.
So the weather is too miserable for the cold-blooded reptiles. There are no signs of snakes in Ireland's fossil records.
He got rid of them. He got rid of everything. They're all gone.
And that for millennia,
Fossils
there
and
weren't any
everything.
snakes in Ireland or Britain. But now Britain has like 4 different types of snakes or something. All right, well, maybe some people actually thought that, Scott. Okay. Number 7, the original color associated with St. Patrick is blue, not green.
True.
That is true.
Scottish.
I was going to read you like the because it had something to do with the rebellion, but oh, here we go. Oh my goodness. Okay. So St. Patrick was actually British. Although he is one of Ireland's most celebrated figures, Patrick was born around the year 390 in what is now England, Scotland, or Wales. As the story goes, he was kidnapped into slavery, you're right, at age 16 and brought over to Ireland. He then escaped to a monastery in France where he converted to Christianity. That's where he became a priest and then eventually a bishop. He returned to Ireland in 432 as a missionary where he played a major role in converting the Irish to Christianity.
And getting rid of snakes.
And getting rid of snakes, yes. Yeah, so everyone should be wearing blue, not green. Blue is actually the color that was most associated with Patrick, and green was considered unlucky. Blue is still considered symbolic of Ireland. Historically, green has been the color that's been linked to a series of Irish rebellions that took place in order to gain independence from the English crown. Oh, cool. All right, number 8. The first St. Patrick parade was in Ireland.
I'm going to say that's false. I'm going to say it's New York.
Yeah, it was in the U.S. But was it in New York? Let me check here. Oh, yeah. Okay, so, and then with regards to the dry holiday, St. Patrick's Day was considered a religious holiday in Ireland for most of the 20th century, so all pubs would close on March 17th. Once it became a national holiday in 1970, everything changed and pubs became a go-to spot for many celebrations.
It's interesting because here in like Canada, the United States, you will have certain dioceses when, like this year, for example, St. Patrick's Day, the Feast of St. Patrick, the March 17th lands on a Friday in Lent, they'll give dispensation or commutation. So dispensation says you don't have to worry about fast or absence, do whatever you want. Commutation means like you have to go to mass or like an hour before the Blessed Sacrament or something like that, and then you can eat meat and drink and whatever.
Is that right? They do that for St. Patrick's Day?
For certain dioceses, because St. Patrick is a patron in some of the dioceses. For example, like Toronto and Ottawa and stuff like that. But in Ireland, they don't really do that, or historically they haven't really done it because it's not nearly as big of a thing as it is in North America.
Yeah, this year sucks because St. Joseph's Day is on a Sunday and St. Patrick's Day is on a Friday. So it's like
it's the worst of everything. And St. Joseph's doesn't move, right? It just sticks on the Sunday. Yeah.
Okay, and
Catholic problems. Yeah. For
you're right. It was
all our non-Catholic friends.
The first parade took place in New York City in 1762.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That early. That's when the English still had it. Or the British, technically.
Approximately 150,000 people generally participate in the New York City parade each year, and around 2 million people come out to watch.
Wow.
It stopped because of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, and it's restarted again in last year.
Good stuff.
Okay, final question. March 17th is St. Patrick's birthday.
No. It'd be his day of martyrdom, probably.
It's the day he died. Yes.
Yeah. Saints' days are typically on the day of their heavenly birthday. Look at that. I dominated
You did
that.
Dominate. Good job.
My catechist would be so happy with me.
I am also very happy with you. Yeah, so...
Well, you're Irish, right?
Yeah, sorta, yeah. Kinda, on my mom's side.
Aren't you like half Irish?
No, it's like... like Irish, Scottish, English on my mom's side. Yugoslavian on my dad's, so I'm just normal skinned. Because if you put the really, really white and then like the darker Eastern European, you're just an average white person, I guess.
Yeah, but you tan super
I do.
well. The Slovenian comes through.
Although it's weird because if my brother grows a beard, there's red in it. So there.
Well, there's the Irish.
Yeah,
Same thing. I get that. Highland Scott.
Well, You are the king of St. Patrick's Day. Congratulations. I hope that
Thank you.
don't eat anything or drink anything that day.
I will celebrate by drinking water and eating bread that day.
Perfect.
And wearing blue.
Yeah, same, but not the eating and drinking part. All right, well, that concludes our final, or not.
This is it. It's over. Shut down. Canceled.
All right, that concludes this week's podcast. Make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, wherever you get your information. Make sure that you check us out at thestinkingalbatross.ca to find out when we have new podcast episodes out. We do it every other Friday, so we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for joining us.
Bye for now.